wanted to do a short video on encounter balance. How to make balanced adversaries for GURPS. It's come up a few times lately on the Reddit forums and from some newcomers, some GURPS newbies, which is amazing to see. A few new GMs. Now I'm not sure where they're coming from. Often they don't mention. Sometimes they do. But in a world of Pathfinder and D&D 5e, where encounters are fairly well balanced, GURPS can be a bit off-putting, I'm sure, because there is very little. There's pretty much no rails, no guidelines on how to stat out a challenging encounter, where these other games have challenging encounter, easy encounter, impossible. They have different levels even. You can tweak your encounter, your adversaries to be a challenge or be deadly or whatnot. GURPS has, sadly, none of that advice in the, well, you'd expect it in the campaigns, I suppose, campaigns book. But it's hard to do in GURPS. Character point cost total doesn't really reflect combat capability, as we all know. You can make a very efficient killer with low points if you really want to, compared to somebody with a high point total with very little combat proficiency. Now immediately we have to ask ourselves, why does every encounter need to be balanced? Do we really need this balance? I don't know. We've certainly got along without it for decades. Me and my group anyways, using GURPS. But here is, I'm going to just kind of spew off some nonsensical advice on how I kind of eyeball my adversaries, how I go about creating semi-balanced adversaries for my PCs, okay? So this is for anybody who's just kind of maybe coming to GURPS new, or I don't know, anybody who just wants to see some weirdo's method from the internet. I like to keep this chart handy. Sometimes I write it on my notebook. I have printed it out and pasted it to my GM screen in the past. So this is in the characters book on page 171. This is in the skills section, and it tells you the probability, okay, of each of skill values. It's a probability of rolling under on a 3d6, okay? Now, you can base everything around this generally. So say we've, well, we'll start with that. If we've got a party of 4 characters, and, typically you'll have a couple fighters and a wizard and a healer or whatever. We're talking fantasy games, so. If I want to make a monster to challenge these guys, with potential to kill one of them, it seems. My kind of baseline is to just take the best combat stats from the group. Okay, so we've got say we've got 3 fighters in the group. Doesn't matter. Take the best combat attack roll. So say one guy's got 14, another guy's got 12, another guy's got 13 skill in their swords or whatever. Take the best. Okay, we give that to the monster. Take the best defense out of the group. Give that to the monster. So this monster can go toe-to-toe with any one of these fighters, okay, in the group. But that would be one-on-one. He'd be a good adversary for. And then I take the best hit points of the group and times that by 2. Okay, so that's a really rough way to get just a baseline monster to sort of challenge the 4-player character group. 5-player, it doesn't really matter. If it's a 5 or 6 players, maybe you take the HP and multiply it by 3. Okay, so there's our starting point. That's a really rough character or monster, but from there you can spice it up a bit. Say you can drop the hit points. Maybe you can maybe have the hit points if you give the thing some DR. Okay, give it DR equal to half of the damage output, okay, of the best fighter, for instance. I would also give this thing the damage output of the best fighter in the group too. So that's kind of, I know it's really kind of wishy-washy advice, and it by no means is it a science, a real science in GURPS, coming up with balanced encounters. But remember, do we need to go for balanced here? Not really. We can do without it. Just giving the characters an out, like the ability to run is all they really need. If you've got this monster statted out and he starts ripping them to shreds, often the dice will just throw the although I'll talk about that in a minute, the probability swing in GURPS. But give the characters an out, a way to run, then they can regroup. They can run, regroup, and come back later. And in GURPS, with the probability bell curve the way it is, things are fairly predictable. So yes, there's no baked in way to easily balance monsters in GURPS. Because of GURPS's very predictable probability on attack rolls and defense rolls, you're not going to really get surprised. So once you find a sweet spot, once you manage to stat a monster that is in the sweet spot challenge-wise for your PC party, you can just deviate slightly from those numbers, upping the defense, but maybe downing, reducing the attack, or vice versa. Once you get into that place, you'll have it locked in, and you'll be off to the races, because the probability won't allow for swingy combat in this. You're not suddenly going to start TPKing and dropping 20s on a D20 and killing people. GURPS has got your back there. It will hold things together well that way. So lean into that probability stability in the system, and just basically match your monsters to your players. Just practically, I copy their capabilities. It's great if, like, quite often I have multiple enemies fighting the PC party, so I will blatantly, like, the characters don't see this, but I will take each character and take their damage output, like the damage he's going to roll, his defense and his attack ability, and then just match those for each monster. And then that monster is either going to face off against the guy who matches him, or even if you mix and match, they will find the characters, the PCs will find, they'll move around to fight their equal. It usually turns out anyways. If the fast guy, the hard to hit monster is fighting the wizard, the fighter will come to the wizard's rescue and take over fighting that hard to hit guy, because, well, the fighter's the one who would have the best chance to hit him. Stuff like that happens, and it makes for great combat. But just remember, when we're matching, if we're matching the values, the combat values to the characters, that is, that's anybody's fight. That's coming down to the dice at that point. Okay, so there's our baseline. Match the players' traits for attack damage, attack skill, and defense, and that will be a 50-50 chance of character death. Subtract 1 from any of those values, and you start to see the probability changes. So say I've got a PC with the character has sword skill of 12, he's hitting 74% of the time. If I give my monster the same, they're equals, they will it's going to be a 50% chance of PC survival. Sometimes he'll win, sometimes he won't. If we just so much as drop 1 off of the attack skill of the monster, look at this change. He loses 12% probability of hit. So I'm saying all of this just to demonstrate that a -1 or -2 can have significant change in attack capabilities or defense or whatever the case may be. This is 3d6 probability. So keep that in mind. So to reiterate, if we want a deadly encounter, we're going to match the PC's capabilities, okay? If we want an easy encounter, we're going to maybe subtract two or three off of the character's level, their capabilities. And then, of course, kind of tweak that if depending on numbers. If you've got one monster facing off against 4 PCs, like I said, just give the monster the best of the group and go from there. Matching the group's damage output and the group's the highest skill and the highest defense in the group, that will make a deadly monster for the entire group. That monster may TPK them. Then adjust downward from there if you want to make it more survivable. Anyways, that's one internet talking heads method of kind of eyeballing encounters for GURPS. Take it all with a grain of salt. It's different for every PC group, of course, and blibbity blah. The usual disclaimer of please ignore everything I've just told you. But anyways, that's kind of my thoughts and how I generally do it for starters. Maybe that'll help some newcomers, some new GURPS players out there. Either way, have some fun with it. Just make sure your PCs have an out. I think that's more than generous enough, right? We all got to kill some PCs once in a while. What's the fun in being a GM if we're not killing PCs, right? Am I right? Roll on.